All right. Who's ready for the next step? Everybody, right? You guys are chomping at the bit, right? Good. You should be. So I thought about what do we talk about next, right? Because we're talking about the basics of business, we're talking about getting things started, and we kind of did an external internal thing. And honestly, that's going to be a lot of what we talk through in this because to be honest, all of the hard skills, I guess we'll call them, like getting the business, getting the referrals, closing the sales, all of those things are super important, right? What's even more important is the mindset, right? The belief in yourself. And I know you're going to let some of you are going to look at me with this woo woo like nonsense, like, ma'am, we are here for facts. We are here for the step by steps. And honestly, this is a mix, but when it really comes down to it, you have to get over yourself. Like in the nicest way possible is you have to get over yourself. And one of those ways is really truly believing in who you are, believing in what you do, knowing from your core that you can do it, right? And what happens is, especially for women's, especially for women in the workforce, women trying to build businesses, women trying to be entrepreneurs, we tend to go to a place of, well, who am I? Who am I to start a business? Who am I to run a business? Who am I to make 6 figures? Who am I to make my own money? And, who am I to make, $10,000+ a month? Who am I to make $50,000+ a month? Honestly, again, doesn't matter. Who am I to make $5 a month, right? Who am I to make any money on my own for me to become financially independent in whatever way that looks like, right? And that stems very deep from this idea of imposter syndrome. Okay. Imposter syndrome sucks. It just straight up sucks, right? It's these internal beliefs where you constantly say, well, who am I to do this? Am I even good enough to do this? Am I smart enough to do this? Am I capable of doing this? Am I anything? Really, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's so many different ways, right? This self-doubt. Like, why are you doubting yourself? Truly, I'm asking you a question. Why are you doubting yourself? Why? What is everything's a test. Okay. It doesn't have to be so black and white. Well, I failed before. Well, did you fail or did you learn a bunch of new lessons that you're not going to repeat? Right? Did things just not work out long term? Was your heart really in it? Is that something you really wanted to do? Is there any reason why you couldn't go back, change things up, and do it again? Right? And the thing about imposter syndrome is it's sneaky, it's mean, it's ugly, and it's all lies, right? Um, and it's way more prevalent in women. It just is. Them's the facts, right? Like women have to prove themselves 2 to 3 more times in the workspace and research and like entrepreneurship than men. And that's just the reality. Um, we don't have to have any sort of like feelings about just the reality of it. But what we do have to do is work through why you might feel like you're a fraud and why that's garbage. You're not a fraud. You're absolutely not a fraud. Okay. At the end of the day, if you're giving your best self everything that you possibly have, if you will do whatever it takes to make sure that whoever you are giving your service to, the best of what you've got, then you're never going to be a fraud, right? Like you're not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes, right? You guys are exchanging energy in the form of money, okay? Money's not good or bad. It's a neutral resource. Somebody is paying you money for everything that you've got, and you're going to give it to them, right? And there's value in that. So one of the ways that I would say to start is by writing down all of your accomplishments, writing down all of your experience, writing down all these circumstances in which you can provide value, right? Like, you didn't have to get necessarily paid for it. Things you've done for your friends, things you've done for your kids, things you've done for your partner, things you've done for your family, right? Some of it can be through paid experiences as well. But, you know, you can't tell me that a stay-at-home mom of however many kids doesn't know conflict management, right? That might not have been a paid role that you have had, right? Or organizational skills, or, you know, whatever it is, right? Like, doesn't matter what hat you've worn, you have learned skills, you've learned life skills. Even if you weren't technically paid for them under a job, you still learned these skills. You're still really good at it, right? So what is it? What are you good at? What's your street cred? What do you bring to the table? What kind of value can you provide to somebody? And if you can really stand behind knowing in your heart of hearts that no matter what, no matter how much money somebody pays you, right? $5, $1,000, $5,000, $20,000, don't sweat yet, $60,000, right? Can you make this promise to them and yourself that no matter what it is, no matter how much money, you are going to give them everything you've gotten more? That right there means you're not an imposter, and it means you're not a fraud. Now, I could end the video right here, but I won't. I will give you guys a little bit more than that, okay? But, you know, imposter syndrome really kind of comes down to like a few different things, right? And the way that we try to hide ourselves, and the way that we kind of like dodge these things with imposter syndrome, this people pleasing behaviors that we tend to do, right? Like, if you're somebody who like over prepares, or you work extra hard, you're like, well, I work 80 hours a week to prove my worth. Well, why? Right? When your cohorts maybe just work their allotted hours and they don't like lose any sleep over that. They don't go to bed thinking, oh my gosh, did I do enough today? Right? Holding back, right? Not really sharing your full true self, not really sharing your full true knowledge or opinions or any of those things, right? To make it seem like, kind of make yourself not stand out as a leader, because you don't want then people to think you're a fraud, right? This comes into kind of maintaining a low profile or ever changing profile. Maybe you skip around from job to job. Maybe you don't always like stick to one thing, right? And you're kind of changing things up constantly. And then you're kind of like, oh, well, you know, maybe I'm a little bit lazy, right? Or maybe you self-sabotage, right? Because you maybe put in low effort because you rather hide behind the idea that you're a little bit lazy than somebody thinking you're dumb, right? Because you're not dumb. And honestly, you're not lazy either, right? Some people use charm or perceptiveness to win approval, right? Like, and then when they do get promotions, or they do really well, or they do become the mom who like everybody flocks around, oh, that's just because I'm charming, not because I have skills, not because I'm likable, not because I'm worth it, not because I'm kind, not because of any of these other million reasons, right? But because like I know how to talk to people, right? Maybe you are the queen of procrastination, you never finish, or you just flat out self-sabotage, right? And it's kind of this idea of like feeling like you're, you know, this feelings of inefficiency, or and this idea of like you kind of like push these like risky decisions, or don't finish something altogether, right? You're filling out this application, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and then you get psyched out, and then you don't follow through, and then it doesn't happen. So you're like, oh, well, it didn't happen because I didn't finish it, not because I finished it and then got rejected, right? There's a difference, right? Um, you know, maybe it's that you burn yourself out in there, right? Trying to overcome this idea that I'm not capable. And so I just push myself, and I expend so much energy trying to people please, We're trying to do so much, so much, so much that this work becomes a chore and it's not really like my purpose or passion anymore. So you burn out, you lose motivation that you once had for success, right? And that's hard, right? Are you someone who chalks up your successes to chance, to coincidence, to good luck, to timing, right? Oh, I just happen to be in the right place at the right time, right? You're constantly crediting your accomplishments to factors that are outside of your control, right? Or we kind of talked about this in the beginning a little bit of I've never done this before, so I can't be successful. I didn't grow up this way, so I can't have more, right? These are ways that people just set themselves up into that self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, this was never going to happen to me anyways. Well, yeah, because you never did it, or you never tried, or you never gave yourself the opportunity, or you never believed in yourself, right? Or we all have those friends who are constantly cutting themselves down, right? We're just undermining our worth, we're undermining our work, we're undermining our achievements, we're making it seem like we're not as competent, constantly making ourselves smaller when we should be making ourselves bigger. We're just making ourselves regular size, right? Like, I'm going to come back to this because this is so huge. You're worthy because you are. You're not an imposter because you are who you are. And that's where your gifts and your talents come from, right? So, what do we do? Okay, right? The problem is we may think these things and we do these things, but nothing ever actually like these behaviors never stop our feelings from being feelings, right? And so when we do these things, we kind of have to start self-reflecting a little bit, right? Which is the most fun part. I'm telling you guys, the inner work just as important as the outer work. Honestly, we could even make an argument that it's more important, but we'll make that argument later. Okay. So this idea is figuring out, okay, which of these things do I do? What are these things that I identify with? What are these behaviors that I keep constantly doing to cut myself down? Why am I doing them? And what do I do next? Right. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is identifying what our crusher is and what's the true lie that we're trying to expose. Right. So once we can figure out what's this core negative belief that we're holding about ourselves that's deeper than I'm a fraud, right? Like what's a statement that you would most dread hearing out loud, right? If someone said this to you, what would just make you want to melt into the ground, right? You'll never measure up. You're not special. You don't have any special gifts. You're not as intelligent as other people. You don't have any talent. You're worthless. You don't have any original ideas, right? Any of those things, they're all gross, right? You have to figure it out what it is for you. And then you have to turn it back around and prove why that's not true, right? And this is where we write down our accomplishments. Just where we say, okay, why isn't this true? Why isn't this thing that crushes me not true? Right? And this is where we create lists of achievements, big, small. It's kind of what we talked about in the beginning, right? Any action you took that shows that it's not all just luck that you got here, that it's not all just chance that you decided you wanted this business, right? And then you got to make an agreement with yourself that we're gonna reframe these thoughts. We're gonna turn them into I am worthy because I am. I have talent and these are what my talents are, right? I have the most original thoughts, right? And we turn these limiting beliefs and we turn them into positive affirmations and we really dig in, right? Like, what are our limiting beliefs? How do we actually want life to go for us? What's a new core belief that I have to start saying over and over and over again? Everything's always working out for me. That's one of my favorites. Everything is always working out for me, right? People love to pay me. My work is of high service and high value, and people love to pay me for it. Period. Right? And there is no limits. Everything works for me, works for my good, works for my favor. And once we can really, and then we say that over and over and over again, we change our mind, we change our thoughts. One of the biggest things that can get frustrating for me, as I know that I'm supposed to change my mind. I know I'm supposed to change my thoughts. I know I'm supposed to, you know, believe positive things all the time, right? But honestly, that's not really true. Like this concept of toxic positivity is garbage, 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 because that's not cool. Right? We're humans. We're supposed to feel our feelings. We're supposed to feel our feelings. And you are allowed to feel your feelings. You can't always be in this high vibe, nonstop all the time. You need to be able to feel. You need to be able to go through hardships. You need to be able to grow and change and all these things. And that's what we should see, right? Because that's where growth comes from, right? And it's what do we do? What do we do when hardships happen? What do we do when we doubt? What do we come back to, right? What core beliefs do we come back to when we start talking to ourselves negatively, or something bad happens, or this person didn't pay, right? And we're going to talk about, how to create a sale. We're going to talk about how to sell something without being a car salesman. We're going to talk about what it means to detach from the outcome. We're going to talk about like no-based questions. We're going to talk all of those actual hard skills that I was telling you about. And we're going to give you practical tools, but at its core, you have to have core beliefs that are positive and that are good and that are working out for you, and that you can do it. You need to believe it from the inside and not seek the external validation that comes from it, right? You're worthy because you are. You're good enough because you are. You are capable of anything, right? Your desires are your guidance. What you have on your heart is what you're supposed to be doing, despite what anybody else tells you. They're not on your heart. They're not in there. They're not telling you, right? Your inner voice. Your inner voice knows, and she's so trustworthy. She's so trustworthy. She knows you better than anybody else. So, you're not an imposter. You're not a fraud. You can do this. We're going to get you started, and then we're going to take you to the next level, and then we're going to keep going from there.